Yeah, let's
check right here.
Hello.
Lance, you guys both in the picture here?
Yeah.
Okay. I got one in my pocket.
When I walk up here, I like this these two tables from right here. Those from that side, that way I can choose to use. Yeah, it's my favorite section of the restaurant. Club. We are a club.
We're going to record this meet and greet,
We are a jazz club.
so we can post it on our social media.
So that they can differentiate from the age. Yeah, that's what we are. We are a jazz club that happens to serve.
We're going to chat here for about 30 minutes with Jon Faddis.
Yeah, we are a jazz.
Lance, you ready?
Mike, test 1, 2.
Get it right.
Hello. We can get it later, right?
How come this mic is louder than mine?
How come is it?
Hardly think so.
No copy.
How many times, is this everybody's first time or have you been here before?
1976. Uncle Charlie Gillespie.
Who? Uncle Charlie. Yeah.
Dr. Charles McCarthy. They brought us here.
Uncle Charlie, that was,
Our Uncle Charlie just passed away in October.
my 3 sons.
Oh, wow.
Very different Uncle
Now
Charlie.
we're definitely dating ourselves.
Charlie was PhD.
So without further ado, I'm going to get it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Blues Alley Jazz. My name is Harry Schnipper, and for the past quarter century, I have been the owner of this iconic club. April has been declared Blues Alley Jazz Month by the City of Washington, D.C., and over the past 2 weeks, we have presented, produced, and promoted a variety of different jazz workshops, lectures, talks, panels, masterclass performances, and meet and greets, and our annual Ella Fitzgerald International Vocal Competition. Tomorrow is International Jazz Day, and we will be concluding our jazz festival all day at Georgetown Waterfront Park. Further details can be found at bluesalley.org.
So, I'm going to begin because honestly, I have either presented or seen this artist for as many decades as we've both been on the planet. In my opinion, Jon Faddis is the greatest jazz trumpeter alive today, but you don't have to take my word for it. Even the great trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie claimed it. I have personally seen him perform with Dizzy's United Nations Jazz Orchestra, conduct the acclaimed Carnegie Hall Jazz Band, and perform in small ensemble and most preferably at Blues Alley. He was born and raised in Oakland, California before following his muse and migrating to New York City. He attended the Manhattan School of Music, eventually earning an honorary doctorate of music, and is where he now teaches. Along the way, he has held down the lead trumpet chair in the Lionel Hampton and Thad Jones Mel Lewis big bands. He has similarly held down the same in countless other bands, too numerous to mention, or has been a featured soloist in soloist in many. He has taught at many prominent music schools and conservatories, including Columbia College in Chicago and the State University in Purchase, New York. Throughout his long and storied career, he's been a composer, conductor, musician, educator, even an actor, and a mentor to many aspiring young student musicians. I often jokingly remark that Jon Faddis writes music that only he can play. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Jon Faddis. Well, I'm prepared for a series of questions that I thought might stimulate a greater conversation this evening. And honestly, you have led what I consider to be a very colorful career. But it had to start somewhere.
So where were you? Were you raised in a musical family?
Yes.
I've done this with you so many times. Was that family located in a house or a home?
Yes.
Well, yes, was that home in the United States of
In
America?
Oakland, California. My mother more so than my father. My father didn't have, I'll put it this way, my father was a fan of the German Clave 1 and 3. Very downbeat. My mother, she played piano, she sang in the church choir, she taught herself how to play guitar. And her side of the family was more musical than my father's side. So I had a sister, I had 2 older sisters. One was a singer and the other played piano. And you can see her online. I don't know if she did this online, but she had the ability to whistle one line of a two-part, box, two-part music. She could whistle like one line and then hum the other line simultaneously. So, kind of musical family,
It's interesting because we're about the same age, I remember my earliest recollections were my parents playing big band, and of course Ella and Sarah and others. And that was the dominant popular music in the 1950s and 60s, and then it kind of changed a little bit, but at the same time, if that's your background in your family, why did you select the trumpet?
I don't want to be corny and say this trumpet selected me, because it's really an inanimate object, but I remember my parents asked me one night, I thought this was an innocent question. And they said, John, if you could play an instrument, which one would you choose? I'm not thinking anything about it, so probably a nanosecond. Not the piano, because my sister played the piano. 2 brothers down the street, one played trombone, and one played the tenor saxophone. Those were out. Somebody else down the street played the drum. And then all of a sudden this image of Louis Armstrong popped into my head because he had been on the Ed Sullivan Show and everybody loved him. So I said trumpet. And the next thing I know, my parents had bought me a trumpet and made me start taking trumpet lessons. I was 7. So that's how that came about.
You're lucky. I didn't gravitate to the trumpet. I was given a hand-me-down trumpet, and I was like, no, this is not what it is. So I took up other instruments, but the trumpet's a very unique instrument. It's because historically, over the last 100 or more years, it's really defined decades in terms of the way it's played and the musicianship that evolved around that instrument.
I tell all these tenor saxophone players who love Coltrane and Michael Brecker, and I tell all the alto players who love Charlie Parker and Johnny Hodges, and I tell all the piano players that love Art Tatum, and I said, look, Archangel Gabriel was gifted a trumpet, not a piano, not a tenor saxophone, not a soprano saxophone, it was a trumpet. It's a trumpet.
My father once said to me, he said, son, time will tell, but Louis Armstrong was the greatest trumpeter of all time.
And I wouldn't disagree with that.
I mean, he was a devotee of it, and he was in the 1940s, 50s, his face was literally the face of the trumpet.
And his voice was the most recognizable voice in
That's
the whole
true.
world.
They still play
More than
What a Wonderful
Elvis,
World.
more than the Beatles. The only one that might have surpassed him as being having a recognizable voice was Muhammad Ali. But
There you go. So I'm gonna jump over because I look back on time, the last century, and the great trumpet players who evolved or defined their generation. Who were some of your earliest jazz influences, John?
Dizzy, first of all, because I was about 10, Louis, yeah, I knew Louis Armstrong, but I wasn't really that deep into his music. I knew Hello Dolly a little bit later when I was a teenager. And I used to sing that. I learned his solo from the record. It's a 45 on Cap Records with the flip side of Hello Dolly was I Got a Lot of Lessons. But I would start with Dizzy, and as I grew older, I started to appreciate other trumpet players more and more. I was actually on a recording session with somebody who had written out Louis Armstrong's Introduction to West End Blues. And so I said, what is this? Oh, that's West End Blues, don't you know that? Oh yeah, I remember. And I was jiving. But as soon as the record tape was over, I went to King Carroll Records and bought West End Blues. And I learned. So Dizzy and then Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, I had a chance to play with him quite a bit. You mentioned Charles Mingus, and my beginnings with Charles Mingus occurred because he had written a piece for Roy Eldridge, but Roy had had a heart attack and couldn't play it. So Roy couldn't play it, so Mingus called Snooky Young, a great lead player. Snooky recommended me, but Snooky had never heard me play. It was just like amazing. So I got the
Jazz Kismet.
Kismet, yeah, that's yeah.
Being in the right place at the right time.
So Dizzy, Louis Armstrong, Roy Eldridge, growing up, if there was a trumpet player on the record cover, I tried to buy it. And at that time, you could buy, at the grocery store, they would have a special bin, and there would be like you could buy 4 records for $1. Four.
Cut out then, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so now, one of those records would be like $80.
Oh, yeah.
Because vinyl's coming back. My trumpet teacher was a trumpet player who played with Stan Kenton. And he told me about Disney, he told me about Snooky Young, he told me about Bill Chase and Maynard. So I got into listening to a lot of great trumpet players. Clifford Brown, Fats Navarro, even though I hadn't met Clifford Brown. He asked me if I had met Clifford Brown. I was born in '53, he died in '56.
I was a little off on that.
Just a little. And that, through Lee Morgan and Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard and Woody Shaw, I got a chance to play with the 3 of them. I just loved the trumpet, but it wasn't until I played with Dizzy for the first time, and that happened when I was 15. And I had taken all of my Dizzy Gillespie records to the Monterey Jazz Festival. I didn't know you could take the record out of the sleeve. I didn't know.
I knew that was good.
I didn't know that. I took all the records, about 53 Dizzy Gillespie records, and I met Dizzy on the fairgrounds of Monterey Jazz Festival. One month said, "John, that's Dizzy." I said, "Mom, go get the records." She ran to the car and picked up this whole thing of records. I'm a trumpet player. I really love your playing. I was wondering if you would please sign my records. And then he saw a stack of records like that. And he sat down on the ground and started signing. And he would say, "I'm ordering this record." "Oh, that's when you play, hey Pete, let's eat more meat." And I started singing his solos to him. And he didn't know. But I think the importance of that was at that time, Dizzy's influence on musicians, especially on trumpet players, his main influence on trumpet players took place during the 1940s. And this was almost the late 60s when this happened. So all the young trumpet players, they were listening to Clifford Brown, they were listening to Miles Davis, they were listening to Chet Baker, they were listening to everybody, but they heard Dizzy through these other trumpet players. But here was a young trumpet player who was into Dizzy, he saw that. signed all of my records. And a couple of weeks later, he was playing at a club. My mother took me to see him and hear him at the club, but I had my horn with me. And he was playing a night, and he walked by the table. I said, "Dizzy, you gonna play the ending?" He said, "You got your horn, you do it." So I ran downstairs to the dressing room, got my horn, and he invited me to play.
What year was that?
That was 1969. And I was still 15, I think. And yeah, 15 was my sophomore year in high school. So I knew after that night that I sat in with Dizzy that I wanted to be a trumpet player.
Actually, it was Disney inspired us to start the Blues Alley Youth Orchestra. He was our first chairman of the board. And I started getting busy back in the 80s, so you definitely had a head start over me. But they often say that Blues Alley is the house that Disney built, because he really put us on the map.
Oh, that's funny, because I never heard that.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. You know I'm messing with you, Harry.
Well, no, the funny part about this is that you stole my thunder. I was going to ask you, and it said that trumpeter Gillespie was a mentor to you.
Could you please elaborate on that?
Well, there were times when I came to New York, I came to New York with Lionel Hampton. I was 18. Whenever Dizzy was playing around New York, I would go and sit in with him. And he would let me sit in with him. He welcomed me to sit in with him. And he didn't sit and say, "No, when you play trumpet, you should do," because he puffed his cheek and he was basically doing everything incorrectly. As someone in the conservatory might teach you, but by that time I was just happy to stand on the bandstand next to Dizzy, get my butt whipped every night. And he would sit down. His main thing was to sit down at the piano and show harmony. That's it. He taught everybody. He taught Miles that. He taught Fats Navarro, Max Roach. He would sit down and say, "Here's what Charlie Parker. Here's what we're doing." So he would tell me. I didn't know. So I started to take some piano lessons. And I finally got a little bit of an understanding of what he was talking about. But for me, just standing next to Dizzy on the bandstand was a lesson in and of itself. And there are hundreds of times that I played with him, and I was always amazed at how he could read an audience, how he could program his set. One of the things he did, that he would tell the same jokes every night. I try to vary my humor, but he would tell the same jokes every night, and it didn't matter if the audience was in Germany and they didn't speak a word of English. He would tell the same joke, and they would laugh at his expressions. He was just a natural. And I once asked him, how did he learn to entertain? And he gave it serious thought, because I wasn't asking this out of the blue. So he said, probably Cab Calloway and Billy Eckstein were the ones that really influenced him.
That's curious that you should say that, because there was one thing that was left out of that description, which is he was a mentor to so many. And I think that's something that, just the United Nations Jazz Orchestra alone boasts some of the greatest musicians of all time. So I saw him as someone who, because he often gave master classes for the youth orchestra in his later days. And
I know what it was about. It was about rhythm.
And the takeaway for me, as a non-musician, when I queried him about why it was that we should be in the nonprofit Blues Alley business, he said, "Where do you expect your next generation of jazzers to come from? If you don't mentor and educate, then you can't have an audience, and you don't have an artist on the stage." And those were very takeaway words from Dizzy for me.
That's pretty good for a South Carolina high school.
That's what I'm talking about. To be or not to bomb. If you haven't read the Dizzy Gillespie biography, then I strongly recommend it. I think you're mentioned it there a few times.
You know, briefly, but we were when it first came out, Al Frazier, we were all sitting there, didn't he like to play poker?
Right.
We go from 25 cents up to $1. That's your final, that's the highest bid. So we're sitting around and he looked at the book and, you know, we were sitting around and he said, man, they should have a whole chapter on you. That's what he said to me.
So when are you gonna write your memoir?
Talk to my wife.
Um,
She's the writer in the family.
you know,
I always tell her, right on.
That's a Disney. Anyways, you know, why music education? I mean, you've been a passionate educator now for many decades, teaching at many prestigious conservatories. And yet at the same time, you're now a doctorate of music at
Well,
Manhattan.
let me just correct something that she said. When I went to Manhattan School of Music as a student, I only lasted about 2 months.
I was being polite.
And what happened was, they had a jazz band. This is in 1972. I quit Charles Mingus' band on a European tour because my father was a member of the, you know, he's like in the civil rights movement, education. You gotta get educated. You gotta go to college. You gotta get a degree. And so I told Mingus, I said, Mingus, I gotta quit the tour and go back to go to college. My father wants to go to college, and he told me, and I didn't understand this at the time. He said, "You're in the best college you could be in now."
And I've heard that echoed by me.
And I didn't understand that. So I went to Manhattan School of Music. I lasted 2 months, and then I quit because I was in the jazz band. They were playing the music of Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, and I was a member of the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, and I was playing first trumpet in that band. And then I come to this band, they got me on second trumpet, and I said, "This guy's playing the music all wrong." And the director says, "I can't put you on lead. He's a senior." So I quit the next day. That was it. And many years later, you know, my philosophy on teaching is to try to pass along with Dizzy, Sweets Edison, Snooky Young, Clark Terry, what they gave to me. And they gave it to me for free. They never asked for a dime. You could sit with them for hours talking about music, and they would just happen to sit and talk with me about music. So I used to charge for trumpet lessons, and then I stopped charging. I said, "You want to talk trumpet? Okay, we'll find some time to do that." And that's what you know, and I got a steady gig teaching, and still people call me, and I mean from all over the world. So, "Hello, my name is such and such, and I'm playing in town with Bjork. I was wondering if I could get a trumpet lesson." Okay, whatever. I'm easy. He's got his horn. But you married the trumpet player.
And there must be something to be said about that, because honestly, having worked with a great many trumpet players, but more importantly, our own Blues Alley Youth Orchestra, with which you worked as well, it gives me a certain sense of satisfaction seeing the full circle of these young people who apply themselves to their instrument and then ultimately become professional musicians. I like to boast that Blues Alley Jazz Society has graduated students from every major conservatory and music school in America. And I think that's really the satisfaction I get, because people often ask me early on, back in the 90s, when we were really applying ourselves to developing a music education program, why? You're a world-class venue. Why do you need, and I would hold that to Disney's remarks, which is, where's the next generation going to come from of artists and audiences if you don't
May I make
invest in the future?
May I make one little correction? You know, you said satisfaction. I might rephrase that, fattest action.
Okay, there you go. Or fattest fear. There's a lot of spins that you can get on that name, Mr. Fattest. The good news is,
My fan.
yeah, but he can talk the talk because he can walk the walk.
But you know, it's difficult right now in the jazz scene, and the past 3 years have been especially difficult with the COVID crisis. So there are a lot of clubs around the country that closed. But also, you know, this music is learned on the bandstand, which is sitting next to Dizzy, getting my butt kicked every night, but just learning what to do and how to do it. But one of the problems now is that there are thousands of young jazz musicians that graduate with a degree in jazz performance, and they don't have a place to play.
That's true. And we lost a lot of clubs here in Washington D.C. So I mean, I tell people the good news is, the good and the bad news is, the good news is that we're the last jazz club standing in Washington D.C. The bad news is we're the last club standing in Washington D.C.
It's both the good and the bad news?
It is, because I think you need synergies. When I was growing up, John, M Street out here was like Bourbon Street. There was just one club after another. And if you've ever been to Bourbon Street, you know that you can't get into one club, you go to the next one.
I was in New Orleans and went to Bourbon Street. And I thought it was like a big college frat party. And there were a lot of, you know, I don't do well around when people abuse alcohol. I don't want to be around. I'll go back to my hotel room and, you know, watch the Munsters or my
You know, I promised to keep this down to 30 minutes, so I'm keeping an eye on the clock because we do have customers that need to get in. I wanted to conclude this conversation with you, John, by asking, how would you describe yourself to others?
Well, it's a good thing you're not asking my son this question.
I know your son, and I understand that answer.
I would describe myself as a vegetarian, as someone who doesn't, I'm like you, I don't like to take drugs, so I'm into alternative medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, you know, all that kind of stuff. A trumpeter, I like to play the trumpet, a teacher, a mentor. I would like to say a good husband and a good father, but someone who's always trying to do better.
The golden rule. So there you have it, folks. Do unto others as you would do unto them.
Well, before they do it.
And you've been in the industry, that's the hard knock school of education. We're gonna open up the doors now, folks. Thank you so much for coming early to talk. Thank you, Mr. Faddis.
Hot fish?